funding for RBI is critically important because it allows us to support enterprises and activities that are not going to be supported by government agencies, that tend to support safe bets and relatively conservative research. Having our own funding gives us the amazing freedom to support relatively high risk and high reward projects. And it also allows us to put our resources into things that we think are important, like education in RNA biology, like building bridges between basic discovery-based scientists and our more clinically oriented colleagues. And it allows us to identify where we see there are bottlenecks in scientific progress and to direct resources at those bottlenecks.
RNA research is moving so fast. And when I say that, I mean the amount of knowledge we have is increasing rapidly. The techniques available seem to change every day. If you aren't bringing in people that understand those techniques and are asking the next set of questions, you can stagnate, right? So you have to keep moving forward. And the RBI has allowed us to do that.
So science is it's a human endeavor. And I think that if you have only a certain type of people doing all of the science, you're really missing out on the true capacity of having a team that has a diversity of points of view, a diversity of lived experience. The collective experience that we all have amongst us allows us to find knowledge even in what might at first outset look like a failed experiment. And I think that's powerful.
Oftentimes, the National Institutes of Health is very hesitant to be able to fund that type of research that's really boundary pushing, but also heading towards the unknown. Some of those are going to be investments that will pay off in the long term. They're not necessarily going to pay off all in the next year after the initial investments. You can see that even in some of the RNA therapeutics, the RNA vaccines that are out there. Those were decades in the making. We didn't just happen upon them. So it's something very important for us to be able to reach out and ask, can you help us go into the unknown and make those next discoveries that are going to be the foundation for the next major advancements in medicine?
100% of the money that we rely on in order to do these experiments comes from outside funding sources. What is just as important as like funding in general is sustained, continued funding. Because the way that funding works right now is you get a bolus of money to do experiments, and then that has a very defined kind of time frame. And when that time frame runs out, the money's gone. And so what that then brings about is a kind of cycle of boom and bust. One of the very real human consequences of this sort of boom and bust cycle is that when we can't pay people to do the experiments anymore, we have to let them go. And that human capital and that human knowledge, that experiential knowledge that they've accumulated while doing these experiments, you just can't replace immediately.
We put a big emphasis on trying to help people connect the dots in their own research program to be able to link what they're doing back to RNA biology via some of these cutting-edge technologies that might help them answer a question.
One way we've done that is to support pilot grants for high-risk, high-reward projects. We funded over 100 of them. Many of them have been carried out in collaboration with clinical scientists, building bridges between the people doing discovery research and people who are treating patients.
A lot of those are the type of experiment that generate huge amounts of data. So what we did was we set up a postdoctoral training program. This is called the Informatics Fellows Program, So the informatics fellows actually are responsible for helping those other investigators that are getting the pilot awards design the right experiment, analyze the data, and interpret the results to sort of close the loop on this problem where a lot of these experiments are too complicated for, many labs to handle on their own.
So those investments pay off. I think that those investments allow us to stay on the cutting edge. I always say that the most important thing in science is to, one, define the critical question that you need to answer, and then two, have the means to answer that question. And if you put those two together, then you can really push science forward.